We're moving at night in case of Chinese spies. Fairly early, dawn begins to strike the tips of the mountains on the frontier, and by the time it's light, we're climbing in a part of the ranges where nobody lives. Ahead is our pass, but we rest at a camp set up by Kamba scouts sent over on previous nights. Tibetan tea mixed with yak butter. Then Tender is told by the scouts about the ambush site. The route they had chosen leads over a 20,000-foot pass, and for the rest of this day we climb slowly. At this height the air is so thin that frequent stops are necessary for oxygen to re-enter the bloodstream. The Kamba's base is supplied regularly by secret airdrop, and our patrol has 1 Bren and 8 carbines or rifles. They say their suppliers limit ammunition to 1 raid a month, and are against any major onslaught at present, but they're silent about which nation is supplying them. As we get higher, our movements become heavier and the cloud grows thicker. Welcome cover on the bare snow face from patrols sent out by the Chinese posts to either side. It was nearly 13 hours since we set out, but at the summit the Kambas paused to lay down Buddhist prayer flags to pray for their conquered country. At 20,000 feet from such hardened soldiers, it's an unexpected and pathetic ceremony. The flags are left, an abandoned symbol in the snow, as the Kambas cross the border into their equally abandoned country. "13 hours to go up, but going down, of course, is quicker." At last we see our first view of Tibet, and our route to the ambush site lies beneath us. We're moving in narrow gullies so that it's difficult to be seen. By evening the terrain changes. We're to move concealed in the innumerable valleys and folds for most of this night. But back in Zoom Valley we know that most of the inhabitants are praying for our success. Their faces are peasant faces from the center of Tibet, without the hard look of the bandit Kambas from the east. These men traditionally fear the Kambas, but because communism forced the Dalai Lama into flight, so they have united in a holy war. And so the whole valley prayed, and the huge prayer wheel at the monastery turned incessantly on our behalf. By the second day, our route has taken us close to the Tibetan section of the Kadari Road, between the Chinese garrisons Dzongkha and Kirong. As we hide in a fold of the ground and the Kambas clean their weapons, we learn from Tender that he deserted as a high-ranking monk when his family was liquidated. Kambas are traditionally unmoved by killing, but Tender is tortured by his damnation as a man of violence, and is equally upset at this monastery nearby when he finds the scriptures and images smashed by the Chinese, who publicly proclaim that they protect Buddhism. An ominous promise for the next day, his face and the dark, grim statues left inside. By dawn we're above the road which winds beside a river, and the Kambas had chosen this corner for the ambush. This is our camera position on the hillside above, and the Kambas are below on a ridge 100 yards to the right, so well camouflaged that you can only just see them moving. Our guard makes sure we don't peer over the ridge at herdsmen below till their backs are to us. The Kambas are nervous that the sun might flash on our lenses, and so warn lorries approaching on the road. So our orders are to sit with our guard behind the ridge till the first gunfire. All we could see were stationary trucks and bullets firing at someone hidden beneath. The back's empty, but a Kamba runs out to blast the Chinese underneath. There's a Chinese soldier. Though we can see him from our position, the Kambas can't because of the truck, just as we can't see the Chinese behind the trucks further up. The Kambas are desperate to get him, as he could radio to cut our retreat. But he gets to the riverbank and slowly creeps away out of our arc of vision. Back at the trucks, the Kambas are still firing at a Chinese we can't see. We think this Kamba must have got someone, but all that we can actually see from our position is a tire punctured by his bullets. But then a Kamba we hadn't seen slowly staggers across the desert, almost under us. Immediately comes the signal for retreat and all the filming to stop, so that they can get the wounded man out. You can just see a blood stain on the back of his left shoulder. And this diagram of the trucks and road shows what happened, as it was sorted out afterwards. Most of the Kambas were on this corner, and with accurate shooting killed the drivers of the first 3 trucks in their cabs. Another 3 or 4 Chinese hid behind the trucks, until Tender got most of them with a grenade. But the 4th truck stopped closer to our position, so though we could see the man who escaped, most of the Kambas couldn't. And when the Chinese ran to the riverbank, out of our camera's arc of vision, only one Kamba went after him. This was Gabo, the eldest. He must have gone berserk, for instead of shooting, Gabo ran up close to stab. But when he reached for his knife, he remembered he'd lent it to someone the night before. Just then the Chinese shot him with a Mauser, and when they grappled on the ground, knocked him partially unconscious. Soon after, the Bren gunner killed the Chinese with a grenade. But when the retreat had been ordered, and he and Tender had carried the old man to a concealed gully, he apparently died in their arms. So they took his religious god box, which never leaves a live Kamba, and we started a non-stop 15-hour march for the pass, racing the Chinese patrols trying to cut us off in the mountains. And 3 days later, back in Nepal at the Kamba camp, a spy from the Chinese garrison at Kirong is being questioned by Tender. The information is that the Chinese reached the ambush shortly afterwards, but he tells Tender no Kamba bodies had been found. Then a local Tibetan brings the amazing news that high in the mountains, above the cloud covering our valley, Gabo, who we'd left for dead, has been found staggering into Nepal. George peels off his blood-stained clothes. Gabo is 52 years old, but amazingly tough. He'd been unconscious for several hours, but somehow the Chinese missed him. And then he'd woken up and staggered back, wounded and foodless, dodging the Chinese patrols. The bullet was fired from low down. It passed close to the heart and out the back. The cuts are where the Chinese battered him with a stone.